One man, one vote. End apartheid. Liberty, freedom. This was the fight for so long in South Africa for so many. And South Africans showed their desire at the end of the era of the National Party, when in 1994, nearly 90% of South Africans rocked up to vote. Yet elections have seen decreasing turnouts since a high point of nearly 90% shortly after that, to the point where in 2024, just 58% of registered voters, not eligible voters, bothered to show up for this election. So what's going on with South Africa? Why the voter apathy? Is South Africa any different than the rest of the world where we have elections? Maybe not. We'll delve into those issues in just a moment. Stay tuned on Chris Wyatt Reports. So what's the story with South African elections? So many people fought for so long to get so many people the right to vote. Those who previously could not vote exercised that right in 1994. But the numbers of South Africans going to the polls has declined over time. Is this an historic anomaly? Is this an unusual situation for South Africa? No, not at all, folks. This is usually a consequence of one of two things. Number one, either society is doing well, and people don't have problems, and so they aren't thinking of governance, and they just simply don't go to the polls out of laziness, sloth, or simply just comfortable in life. Sometimes too busy making their way through life. That's usually one reason. Another reason is that people have simply given up hope and faith in their governance or the political parties leading the country. And that is a major reason why South Africa is going through such voter apathy. In 1994, nearly 89% of the population came out to vote, and over 89% came in election a couple cycles after that. But by 2019, that figure had declined to 66.1%, and the elections had just concluded on May 29, 2024. The figure is just over 58%. 58% of the registered voters, 27 million people, just 16 plus million showed up for the election. Now that's out of about 40 million eligible voters. That's pretty sad. The ANC not only lost 4 million votes and dropped from 10.4 million to 6.4 million, basically about 1 in 10 South Africans actually made the mark for the African National Congress to lead this country. Now that's not just sad, that's pathetic. Look, I'm not living in a glass house and throwing stones. America's election turnout is often disappointing as well. But ours tends to be on the other side of the spectrum. People are satisfied with life by and large and not dissatisfied with governance, although we're reaching that stage that South Africa's at. So why does this go on? Well, some political parties and a lot of analysts make the same mistake election after election after election after election. And that is, this election will be different. The youth will turn out. The youth will make the difference. But with the historical anomaly of Barack Obama in 2008, youthful voters tend not to vote. They always poll among the lowest percentage in their age cohort. In fact, in 2021 municipal elections, the 18 to 20-year-old cohort for South Africa was the lowest voting cohort. And that holds true across countries around the world for the most part. The economic freedom fighters are very disappointed in their performance in this election, but they can look no further if they do self-introspection and realize that they spent a lot of time on college campuses. College campuses are a small number of votes, and they're already usually radicalized because universities are no longer universal education centers. They're actually indoctrination centers throughout the Western world, especially here in South Africa. So you already have that vote going to some leftist lunatic party. So the EFF spent a lot of time getting university students to register to vote and turning them out, but they don't turn out in the numbers that you expect. So with the exception of Obama in 2008, the youth aren't going to get it done for political parties, and folks need to recognize that reality. I've voted in every single election since the age of 18. I've taken my responsibility as a citizen very seriously, but not everybody does for various reasons. And that isn't going to change no matter what you or I do. So people need to accept that reality. So why aren't people voting in South Africa? Well, it's a combination of factors, not the least of which is the behavior of the ruling African National Congress, which has been given a serious PK, a slam down, a little smack upside the head in this election, dropping from 57% of the electorate in 2019 to just 40.2%. A precipitous fall, a historic fall, one that in any country in Europe, the leader of the party would have already been sacked and would be looking for a vacation retirement home. But not here in South Africa, where everything is bat crap crazy at times when it comes to politics. So for the moment, Cyril Ramaphosa remains in power with the African National Congress as they seek to form either a government of national unity or a coalition. So they fell. Why did they fall? Well, people have had enough. And the straw that broke the camel's back, as I reported in 2021, was on June 29th when the Constitutional Court declared that Jacob Zuma was in contempt and sentenced to 15 months in prison, and he was supposed to report there by July 4th, and if he didn't, he was supposed to be taken there before July 8th by authorities. Neither of those happened. He showed up in the early hours of the 9th, and then all hell broke loose in South Africa as Zulu went bat crap crazy and mad, looting, murders, the pilfering of radio stations, shutting down transmitters, the theft of ammunition, police unprepared, military unprepared, intelligence service ignoring what was going on. Cyril Ramaphosa himself running around and telling people to wear their mask, wear your mask, for 4 days while South Africa was on fire, an insurrection inside the country, and nothing was done about it. Of course, Cyril valiantly showed up later on in his BMW 7 Series with his motorcade of others wearing his $10,000 suit, picked up a shovel, a spade, and shoveled a little bit of debris from someone's life savings from a shop into a wheelie bin, smiling for the cameras after failing in governance and nearly letting his country go into flames. That has something to do with it. And that explains the rise of MK in part under Jacob Zuma. So, a lack of service delivery, a lack of governance, opaque behavior of the ANC, a pervasive kleptocracy, theft at every level, every scale, across the board. And South Africans are simply tired of the racialization. Black, white, brown South Africans are sick of politicians turning everything into a racial conversation. That's the domain of the Twitterites and the social media trolls. But that's not the domain of average South Africans. I have had such wonderful interactions with black, white, and brown South Africans since I've been here, as usual. It's just amazing. The people that act so poorly are politicians and those in the legacy media as well as social media. So, corruption has played a role. Opaqueness has played a role, poor governance, poor service delivery, all these things contribute to the point where people simply lose confidence and faith. And the ANC seem to think that forever they could ring the drum beat, or beat the drum, ring the bell of liberation credentials, and that would get them through to the next day, to the next election. But clearly, liberation credentials have lost their currency. That no longer convinces people that, hey, you can do it. And this election was particularly sad, watching the ANC send out its fossils like Thabo Mbeki, Baleti, and Toka Sexwale going to neighborhoods to poor people who have nothing as they roll around in their nice cars and their luxury suits and all the wonderful kit that they have in their life. It's so great and grand living in luxury as the elites. And going to neighborhoods where people have no water and there's potholes and their kids are getting shot at in school and there's drugs everywhere and they're inundated with all kinds of problems and saying, just give us more time, just give us more time. People have lost hope. They've lost hope, they've lost faith, certainly in the African National Congress, hopefully not in South Africa, hopefully not in the country, but people have lost faith in the ruling party. And they've looked elsewhere. Those politically active have looked to other political parties, but many have looked elsewhere. Let me give an example of just how bad things are for the African National Congress. In the Eastern Cape, where I'm currently at in Gqeberha, Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, Port Elizabeth, here in the Eastern Cape, the ANC has always had a hammerlock on votes, typically getting well over 70%, 80% of the vote. This time, they won the province, but only 50% of registered voters showed up. So the people that they went out and bothered to get registered, only half of them went to the polls. That should tell you volumes about the situation in South Africa. So voter apathy is a consequence of poor governance and theft and dishonesty. And ultimately, probably the most important part of why people get up on the ANC is their condescending attitude towards voters, especially black voters. The way they treat black South Africans, which is ironic when you hear the likes of Lindiwe Sisulu talking about the Western Cape. Look how the DA treats black people. Have you been to the Eastern Cape there, sweetheart? Hey, sugar, have you ever been on this side of the country? Seriously? Children dying in pit latrines because the money was stolen by BEE contract tenders instead of building abolition units for kids to go take a leak or do a number 2. Falling in the feces of a 3-year-old. This just happened a month or 2 ago. And you have no shame, you have no regret for the conduct of your party and what it's done to South Africans. So there you go, folks. Lindiwe Sisulu talking about how the DA treats black people in the Western Cape, which is far more prosperous and in far better shape than the rest of the country. Yet here in the Eastern Cape, the stronghold of the ANC, things are desperate. Turning in 63 million rand from the local government because the officials didn't know how to spend it for a feeding program for small children, infants, and 15 infants and toddlers starved to death because they returned that money to the national government. Yeah, if you're wondering why people are apathetic and why they don't come out to vote, look in the mirror, African National Congress. You've brought South Africa to this level. It's a shame, but hopefully, with this current election, the results, perhaps maybe South Africa will be fortunate, a decent, honest government of a coalition of some sort will come out of this, perhaps ANC, DA, and IFP, maybe something else. And maybe the tide will begin to turn against corruption, vanity, self-enrichment, craven political power, and self-aggrandizement. Well, from Port Elizabeth, folks, this is Chris reporting on voter apathy in South Africa. Be safe out there, treat each other well, and don't take any wooden nickels. They don't work in the slot machines. Cheers.